Dr. Nicole Lipkin, and this is the Hey Kiddo podcast, where we talk about all things parenting. And today we're talking with Dr. Kenneth Ginsburg about lighthouse parenting. Dr. Ginsburg practices adolescent medicine at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia and is a professor of pediatrics at the University of Pennsylvania School of Medicine. He is the founding director of the Center for Parent and Teen Communication and author of the recently published Lighthouse Parenting, Raising Your Child with Loving Guidance for a Lifelong Bond. I'm so excited to have you on the show today, Dr. Ginsburg.
It's a complete privilege to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, so tell me about the book. Tell me about the concept of lighthouse parenting.
So the good news is this is not a new concept, right? This is not, you know how it seems like we have this pendulum that swings from one side to the other, and we have new kinds of parenting styles that are named after like farm implements or animals.
Yeah.
What lighthouse parenting is really is how to do what we know works. And what we know works is balanced parenting. We've known this for about 6 decades. It's been studied. This balance between your child knowing that they're loved and knowing that whatever you do comes from a place of caring with your need to keep your child safe, right? It's that balance by setting boundaries and rules when appropriate, right? And it's about that balancing act that we know, Nicole, we know that this creates children with the greatest emotional health, the lower behavioral risks. They do better in school. And what I care about the most is that they have the strongest relationships within their families. They have the best open communication. They'll go to the parents when they need them. So what I wanted to do as a pediatrician is help people understand not just the science behind that, but the common sense behind it, how to apply it. I mean, gosh, Nicole, I'll bet you if you asked your great grandma, hey, what works? She'd be like, make sure your kids know they love them, that you love them, but don't let them get in trouble, right? So I actually have it's a poem, I think, that really describes lighthouse parenting in full to give you an idea of why I picked this metaphor. Can I give it?
Let's hear it. Yeah, let's hear it.
So it's, I choose to be a lighthouse parent, a stable force on the shoreline from which my child can measure themselves against, right? I'll send my signals in a way that they'll choose to trust. I'll look down at the rocks and make sure they don't crash into them. I'll look into the waves and trust that they're going to learn to ride them, but I'm committed to preparing them to do so. This last piece, as an adolescent doctor who has 29-year-old kids who I want to be engaged with for decades, this last piece might be the most important piece. I will leave my light shining bright so that when they need a safe return, know where to come. Right?
Yeah, it's emotional.
Balance.
Yeah.
It's letting them know we love them, but not doing for them, not controlling them, not hovering over them, but preparing them.
Yeah. But what does that mean? Like, what does that mean in practice? Because we read these things, we know these things, we want to choose. The word choose was in that poem. We want to choose these things. But it's really hard day in and day out to actually show up in the way you're choosing to show up.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. And if it wasn't hard, we wouldn't be having this conversation, right? But the fact that something's hard or complex or takes work, the fact that sometimes you're not going to do well and you're going to learn from those experiences doesn't mean we should avoid the conversation. It means we should double down on thinking about it. So let me, before we get to what it looks like, I'd like to actually address the elephant in the room. And the elephant in the room is how much pressure parents today are feeling. And how much they're worried about getting it right or not. So I want to point out that in most parenting materials, most parenting books, most blogs, it tells you what to do. And then it gives you at the end a line or two that says, take care of yourself first.
Hmm.
I begin there. I begin there.
Yep.
And it says, I choose to be a lighthouse parent, a stable force on the shoreline from which my child can measure themselves against. So let's talk about this before we get to details. It means you take care of yourself first, that you are secure in your own footing. And now that my children will choose to measure themselves against, this is where parents begin getting a lot of anxiety about showing up or how to show up. And what I will tell you, hands down, is that humans raise the best humans. And
Hmm.
that when we think parenting is easy because someone implied it was, or gave you 2 bullet points to follow, then we begin feeling like we have to be perfect. No, 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 no. Children learn best from real humans. Children
Hmm.
feel most secure going for advice and guidance and support to people who take life seriously, who don't get it all right, but take the steps to right themselves. So breathe, breathe. And now let's talk about showing up. The fact that you chose those words, Nicole, before you show up tells me that you know what the most important thing in parenting is, right? Which obviously you do. That is showing up.
Yeah.
Good parents don't have children without problems. Humans
Yeah.
have problems. The world's a complicated place.
Yeah.
Parents show up with their presence without condition, and their children know that they're not in it alone. But they show up in a way that isn't with that, kiss of death sentence to parenting. Let me do this for you.
Mm-hmm.
Because let me do this for you. I used to teach nursery school, right? You
Yeah.
say that
Yeah.
to a 4-year-old or a 3-year-old. You say it to a 2-year-old. They're like,
They'll
no,
take you up on
no.
my kid will take you up on that.
But meaning let it, you do it for you?
No, no, no. But it's funny because when my kid was in preschool, we got a report from the teacher, like people always want to help, like all the other peers like want to help, and like he's learned to sit back and let them do it. So we had to reverse some of that.
So that would be my loving and
Yeah.
deeply respectful advice, is that you do
Yeah.
have to reverse some of it.
Yes.
Because life is not full of people doing things for you.
No. No.
And when so number one, it can be too easy. But number two, when someone says, let me do it for you, the message is, I don't think you can do it for yourself. And
Yes.
what we need to be, you know, like, can we pay attention to the subtitle of my book? Because the subtitle tells you everything, right?
Yeah.
Love guidance, right? Guidance, number one, for a lifelong or enduring bond. When
Yes.
we do for, children feel incompetent and end up resenting you because they don't learn how to become independent. They feel controlled, right? So when we overprotect or hover, our children feel controlled. When you feel controlled, what do? You push away. When
Absolutely.
you feel guided, meaning someone trusts in your ability to learn, they're going to help you learn what to do. You're going to feel safe learning what you do. Who doesn't want a guide, right? I'm in my
Right.
60s. I wish my parents were still around to guide me, right? But I need
Yes.
guides all the time. So we create an enduring bond when we get this showing up right. No conditions. I'm not doing for you. I am preparing you, because
Yep.
preparing you is the best protection, and it's what makes our relationship last.
I love that. I absolutely love that. And I think and again, it's hard. It is hard when, like, for example, when you are trying to get out the door in the morning and there's a time where you have to get your kiddo to school and you have to get to work, and your 5-year-old is taking a really long time zipping up their jacket or putting on their shoes or whatever it might be, and there might not be the time. So in situations like that where guidance there are some restrictions, like you have to be, or there's guardrail, like you have to be someplace at a certain time. How do you handle those moments? How do you express the message there?
Yeah, so I want to be clear. If you zip your child's jacket or put on their shoes because you're in a hurry, I'd like to reinforce that you are indeed a terrible parent, Nicole. No, seriously. This is not the big stuff. Let's stop fretting
Yeah.
over this. This is the problem when the pendulum swings in the other direction, and we think we're supposed to be having long, in-depth conversations with our 5-year-old about how they feel about zipping their jacket, right? Like
Yeah.
let's meet in the middle. Life has to go on, and sometimes you have to zip your child's jacket, right? And if
Mhm.
they don't know how to do it on their own, then you teach them in another moment, right?
Mhm.
So we're too hard on ourselves when we think every moment has to reach perfection. Part of raising children is helping them understand I need to manage my real life. And
Yep.
but this is also where consequences come in, right? Like it's okay for there to be consequences. If you have to go to a doctor's appointment, zip their jacket. If you're going out to get toys or a treat for them and they are dawdling and therefore you run out of time, then they won't be able to get the treat that time. So like not every moment has to be a teaching moment, but we take advantage of what can. And that was actually a perfect example of what consequences should look like. When
Mm.
consequences are directly related to something the child did or didn't do, then they understand them and they learn, which means they're being disciplined, which means learning. When we take something like not zipping your jacket and we don't let them go outside, well, maybe that's not true on a cold day, but we ground them or we take away their phone, there's no connection in a child's mind. They don't feel taught, they feel punished.
Right.
That's no good. When children feel punished, they feel like victims and they learn nothing. If they learn nothing, then they haven't been disciplined, right?
All right, back up for a second. Let's break this down. And like if we can use the morning routine, because it's my son's 6, and this is like a lot among my parent group. The morning is chaos for a lot of us, for a lot of people. Like it's just, yeah, it just becomes a very chaotic, frustrating experience in a lot of households. So help me understand and help our listeners understand punishment versus consequence versus, you know, how you kind of shift from chaos to consistency and a little calmness around certain routines that often are very chaotic for families.
Gosh, so much to say here.
Sorry,
Let's,
big question.
really big question. I just hope that I can handle it well in a way that is understandable because there's so many points. Let's take it at its highest level and
Okay.
let's remind ourselves what the word discipline mean and what our goal is. We think discipline is about punishment, right? And you're already getting it wrong. Discipline means to teach, ideally in a loving way. Shares the same root as the word disciple. So let's start there.
Mm.
Then let's understand the next point. And the next point is that as parents, one of the most important things we do is co-regulate with our children. Fancy talk for lend them our calm. Also fancy talk for do the opposite, right? So chaos begets chaos. And if our children feel like there's an emergency going on, they're not going to be able to focus their mind on the task. The
Mm.
next point that I would like to make is that I had another point. I told you that this was hard. So we talked about regulating ourselves. We talked about
Discipline.
discipline. We want to prepare them with the skills to be able to do it, right? In real time. So, but it doesn't have to be when there's an emergency happening right now. And I remember the other point There we go. Uh,
It always comes around.
the other point is this: children love our attention. And
Yes.
they're not very good at being able to distinguish good, positive, wonderful attention versus the only attention I get. And the reason that calm and consistency matters so much in discipline is that we want for the consequence to be relatively swift, not harsh, but swift, so that we don't get into these cycles of negative communication. In other words, if the morning routine feels like you're asking, begging, demanding, all of that is attention. And we get into negative cycles of communication when we do that. If we repeat ourselves 7 times, each time with a little bit more urgency and panic in our voice, and that is our pattern, guess what? Our children are trained to make you repeat yourself 7 times because it's attention.
Mhm.
If you then threaten after you make the demand and you go up and you threaten 3 times before there's a consequence, guess what? Our children will pull us into that cycle. So we have unhealthy communication patterns, right? One unhealthy communication pattern I'm going to call nagging. Please, 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 please. And then you get to the threats. If you don't, then so we either have a nagging or a hostile relationship. So let's now put all of this together. The morning routine is not life or death. This is
Nope.
not where the big moments of parenting matter. So let's not pretend it does. But it is very real. And in this moment, we begin to help our children understand how to maximize our attention. And I want them to be having positive relationships. And what that means is if things are really tough for them, teach them how to make it untough, stay calm because it's not an urgency, but the consequence is more immediate, right? I can't function. We can't get you to school in time. We can't go through this. And therefore, right? Does that make sense?
It does, but what's the consequence? That's the
Um,
part I'm having trouble understanding. What's the consequence?
it's got to be something that matches what has gone wrong, right? So that the child doesn't feel punished, right? So it's really easy when they want to do something like go to the mall, go get toys, go outside and play in the snow.
Hmm.
Really easy because you have a schedule to keep. And if because of their dawdling, you lost 15 minutes, then they can't do that. So perhaps we can teach them the importance of learning to do these things on their own in less urgent situations where we can fairly
Mm.
a consequence. What we're not going to do is say, now you can't go to school, because that could really, really
But
make
it
a
could
number on
be,
their jacket.
but it could be, hey, you wanted to scoot to school. Now we can no longer scoot to school. We have to drive to school. Like it could be that.
That's a perfect example. And this is why
Okay.
it's so lovely that you have a 6-year-old child. Because what you just did, Nicole, I'm almost certain, is put this into the context of your own life. And
Yeah.
where parenting experts go wrong is when they think that when we think we're the expert in your own life, right?
Hmm.
I can give
Hmm.
you generalities and I can give you ideas, but I can't tell you what's going to work in your home. If your 6-year-old son likes to scoot to school, there's your consequence. But I didn't
Hmm.
know that, right? But you
Right.
were able to put it into a model
Right.
that says, the consequence will be directly related to their behavior. That's the bottom line. And Nicole, let me say this. I did used to teach nursery school, but I'm an adolescent doctor. I'm an adolescent
Hmm.
doctor with young adults as children. And why am I writing Lighthouse Parenting designed for the parent of the 6, 7, up to 12-year-old? Why? Because when we get these things right in childhood,
Yes.
adolescence is much smoother and our relationship is much stronger. When
Yep.
we help our children know, my goal is to have you get along in life, in childhood, then imagine how much easier adolescence is. When in childhood, we create the kind of relationships where we have open and clear communication and where we don't have nagging and hostility as our primary communication styles, imagine not only how much better adolescence goes, but how much longer your bond will last throughout your lifetime.
Right. Right. It also doesn't mean that even if you have a strong bond and you've done the things, that things don't sometimes go wrong in adolescence.
Of course they
Yeah.
will. Humans are complex, but it's not that there's something wrong with adolescence. Adolescence is an inspirational age, right?
Hmm.
Adolescence is an amazing opportunity for us to prepare our
Hmm.
children to become adults. Adolescence is an inspirational time as a parent because you're beginning to see the adult your child's turning into. They're thinking in all sorts of new ways. It's amazing. It's an amazing
Yeah.
time. It's why my book, Congrats, You're Having a Teen, that title is not sarcastic, right? It's
Yeah.
about how to leverage this opportunity. But let's go back. Nicole, life is complicated. Every
Hmm.
stage of life is complicated. But
Hmm.
adolescence in particular is the time of identity development.
Yep.
It's the time of you're getting these fundamental questions down. Who am I? Am I normal? How do I fit in? How am I going to contribute? These are big
Huge.
questions.
Huge.
So if you're going to have a thoughtful human being as an adolescent, which is what you're hoping for, of course there's going to be bumps and bruises along.
Hmm.
But it also, I'd love to talk about why it makes you that much more important in their life.
Please.
Yeah, I'm not
Yeah.
talking too much yet.
Do it.
So,
No, keep
so,
talking. I'm like, this is
so
fantastic. Keep talking.
all right. So now here I am as an adolescent working on these very big questions. Who am I? Do I fit in? And what that means is I'm going to try on different hats. It also means that I am very vulnerable to other people or things on the internet saying, try on that hat. It makes me
Yes.
very vulnerable. And sometimes things are not going to go well for me, right? My peers might turn against me or probably will at some point.
Hmm.
Some other influence is going to be negative for me. And I'm going to question who I really am.
Hmm.
Let's get back to lighthouse parenting. A stable force on the shoreline from which they can measure themselves against. That wasn't just about role modeling, from which they can measure themselves against. When we know our children, who they really, really are,
Mm.
all of the great things about them, their curiosity, their sense of humor, their sense of justice, their caring, their sense of fairness. We know all these things from the time our kids are 2 and 3 years old. They're beginning to come into shape.
Hmm.
So we as parents know who our children is in all of their goodness and all of their wonderfulness. And we know what they need improvement on. We know what makes us want to pull out our hair. So, what that means is, as I'm an adolescent and life's getting really hard for me, and I'm losing my friends, and I'm not sure who I am
Yeah.
at the moment, and I can look back at that lighthouse and the person who knows me the most, all that's good and right, and why I'm a pain in their butt,
Hmm. Hmm.
chooses to love me. That is the
Hmm.
most protective force in a human life.
Yep.
Ask yourself this question, Nicole. Why do we love? And the reason we love is so that the humans we're raising learn that they are deserving of being loved.
Mm.
That has lifelong implications.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. Love that. I have a million questions to ask you. It's like popping up. I want to talk about, there's two things I want to talk about. First of all, I want to talk about kids and failure.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously allowing, like, as a parent, watching your kid fail, very hard. but absolutely giving that gift to your child of letting them fail. And again, being there to be the one to talk to, all of that is so critical. But talk to me about the lessons that can come from that, how we can carry ourselves as parents, how we can be a support around that.
So let's start by talking about the importance of loving and caring boundaries.
Hmm.
Boundaries where we don't let them fail. Because if you and I just begin this conversation, we have to remember how much anxiety the parents listening are having, right?
Yeah.
Because failure feels like such a big and scary word. So what I'm going to say is you didn't let your child put their hand on the stove when they were 2, run into the street when they were 4, get into a car with a drunk driver when they're 16. We have very clear boundaries, safety boundaries, beyond which kids cannot stray. That not only means that failure is never going to be an absolute disaster, but rather a learning opportunity. And it also means that children are going to be more secure in exploring the universe. So setting rules does not restrict children. It gives children freedom. It gives children freedom to explore within those boundaries. And you'll actually find your kids are more creative and take more chances when they know that they're protected. So now, failure is an opportunity. I wish I could change this word, right? Because
Hmm.
failure seems so absolute. We need our children to fail because if they fail while they're under our watchful eyes, we can guide them to recover. We can cheer them on as they get back up. We can talk about the strength that they're exhibiting in their resilience. And if we have them fail, but if we overprotect or hover over them now, let's be really clear, failure's still going to happen, but they're
Yeah.
not going to have any recovery tools. And because they're not going to have any recovery tools, it's going to happen when they're an adult in much
Yeah.
more dangerous territory. So
Yep.
failure in childhood and adolescence is actually a gift, right? But let me tell you
Yep.
something else. Some parents worry so much about the immediate next step in their child's life, meaning, what are their grades? Are they getting the trophy? What college are they going to get into? What's going to happen when they're 18? That we actually overprotect our kids, and therefore they don't learn not only the skill sets to recover, but they also don't learn their own limitations. Human beings are uneven. You are speaking right now to the most uneven human being in the world. I am literally fabulous at what I do, right? Give me a young person in crisis, I'm awesome. I can't change a tire. I have no sense of direction. When people say north, I'm literally like, what is that? Right? I I am so limited. All right. But what happens, how am I going to learn what my spike is, what I'm really good at, if I don't try some things
Yeah.
and actually experience failure? Right. So, what I tell parents is that what we want to do is always encourage our children to try. And then when they are trying and they're doing something that comes really easily, it's not very interesting to them, but it's just unnatural for them. That's a freebie. Just take it. But when your child tries really hard at something, isn't perfect, but really wants to get better, that's their career. When a child works really hard at something and they are pretty good at it, but not great at it, but they're having fun. That's their hobby. That's what gives them a balanced
Mm.
life. When a child tries really hard at something, they get the support, but they're just terrible at it. And it's not interesting to them. Let them forget about it, right?
Mm.
Because
Okay.
this drives anxiety, right? You have to pass school, don't get me wrong, But what drives anxiety is this feeling that you have to be good at everything instead of acknowledging that we're uneven. Being uneven is what makes the world work and what allows us to learn our superpowers.
Right. I love that. Okay, so they try something, they're excellent at it. That's a freebie.
If they're not that interested in it, it's a
If
freebie.
they're not
Just
good at
take
it.
it. Yeah,
What if they're very interested in it and they're very good at it immediately?
great, wonderful.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
my guess is that that child is going to want to expand their limits, because if they're very interested, then they're also going to have two other traits super important to human learning: curiosity and intellectual humility, right?
Hmm.
You're going to
Hmm.
want to explore, and you're going to always want a teacher who knows more, right? So
Okay.
that is exactly what you want.
So how do you foster that? Like this group of kids, like how do you, or that skill? How do you foster that? Like expose them.
Expose them, support their exploration, praise them not as it, we know how to create a growth mindset, right? So praise them that in a way that basically says, not you are blank, you are smart, you are good
Right.
at math. Don't do that, but instead, you did blank, and
Yep.
therefore blank happened. You worked so hard, and therefore you learned more. You
Right.
asked the right question to your teacher, and therefore she taught you more, and now you better understand it. So you give the kids power, you foster it in that way, you give them opportunities to grow, but also, let's keep the pressure down. Life is a journey. Your child doesn't have to be exposed to everything at one time,
Hmm. Hmm.
right? Right.
Yep.
So, yeah.
Okay. So that's when they're really good at something, they're interested in something. Now they try something, they hate it. You wanted them to love it. They hate it. Let it go.
Yeah, yeah. Let's just really go with what you just said, Nicole. You just
Mhm.
expressed parental disappointment. And
Parental disappointment. It's a thing.
it's
It's
that
a
D
thing.
word.
It's
It's
a
that
big
D
thing.
word, right? So when if I'm speaking to like a group of kids, like in an auditorium or something, right? And I have one of my slides. So one of my slides is fear of the B plus, and kids go, and the other is the D word. And I
Mm.
do not have to explain it to kids. If I have parents that are like, D, what is a D? But kids go, like
Oh.
this fear of disappointing us is really hurting this generation greatly. Respectfully to all of the wonderful parents out there, your child, you're lucky to have a child who is able to say to you, this is not my interest. That makes you lucky, because that's a child who knows themselves. It means that they feel comfortable enough with you to tell you that
Yep.
of what their spikes are. Remember, I'm going to get this metaphor wrong because I'm such not a horticulturist, but it's like pruning a plant, right?
Yeah.
You don't let it go in a million different directions if you want to figure out what its strongest shoot is, right?
Yeah.
So we let them trim according to their interests and their talents. And that is also, Nicole, consistent with brain development, don't forget,
Yes.
right?
Hmm.
Brain
Hmm.
development is
Absolutely.
all about pruning. Like, it's
Hmm.
literally the scientific word that they use, right?
Yep.
We're going to get our best brain developed. We're going to allow ourselves to focus on an area of strength and let go of the other areas. It's the disconnect that creates anxiety. One of the things that creates anxiety, and that's what I'm trying to tone down, right? Because a little bit of anxiety is very empowering. Too much
Sure.
anxiety is paralyzing.
Sure. All right. There's two questions. One, what if your child doesn't like school? What if that's the thing that they're not interested in doing?
I would take it up a level again, and take it away from that kind of potential panic territory. Because if your child
Hmm.
doesn't like school, the first thing you're going to say is, "Oh my God, my child's a failure." I'd like you to take it up a level and understand that there isn't a child on earth who doesn't like learning. Children are designed to learn. Children are designed to explore. Adolescence is about taking exploration up a notch.
Hmm.
So rather than saying my child doesn't like learning, how about if you say my child doesn't find learning in this setting optimal for them?
Beautiful.
And then what you do, I just made that up on the spot, but I really like
It
it.
was really good.
I really like it.
It's
And
really good.
how about then if we then say, how and where does my child learn best? Right. And if it's not in the structured setting of school, how about we find other opportunities? Maybe your child is a creative genius. Uh,
Mhm.
Maybe your child is like me, a pretty moderately intelligent guy, moderately intelligent enough to become a doctor, but for whom sitting still was
Mhm.
absolute torture. Not only was it torture, but my brain couldn't turn on
Mm.
when I was sitting still, right?
Mm.
And how about we begin looking for people's learning styles? And we can't change every school to be adapted to every child. But this is the beauty of being a parent, is we can create learning opportunities in other settings, other ways of learning. And then what's going to happen is your child's going to discover their spike. They're going to feel more competent. This
Mhm.
is, I have this 7 C's model, right? They're going to feel more competent, which is going to build their confidence, which is going to lower their anxiety, which means that they're not going to be running from the tiger all the time in school. And I'll bet you that they'll be able to focus better in school when they're not feeling badly about it all the time, because
Yeah.
we're looking for their spikes, and their love of learning in other settings.
Am. That was fantastic. I love that. Thank you. I want to go back. I wrote something and I also really appreciated and this should be your next book, Uneven. There's your title. That was
Oh
fantastic.
wow, yeah. Or I could
Really good.
just be like a big poster of this face, uh,
I'll
uneven
be there
across
with
it.
you.
Yeah,
I'll
yeah.
be there with you. Um, you
That, by
talked
the way, is a
about,
brilliant idea. That's a
there you
brilliant
go.
idea for a book.
There
Yeah,
you go. That's my special sauce is brilliant ideas. The carry
yeah.
through is another question. Okay. So you mentioned recovery tools a while back when we were talking about failure. And you talked about on the parenting side, which I loved. Can you talk about the recovery tools on the child side?
I could talk about this endlessly.
Okay.
Let's remember that being uncomfortable emotionally or having distress during a difficult situation is a sign of mental health. Pause. I'm going to say that again because it's that important for parents to understand. A child being distressed when there are authentically difficult situations is a sign of mental health. You don't want a child without feelings. You don't want a
Mhm.
child who isn't thoughtful. The question becomes, what do they do with that distress? And there are positive ways of coping with distress, and there are negative ways of coping with distress. And what will determine someone's mental health is that. I've been writing about stress and coping for 20 something years at this point. Why? Because I'm an adolescent doctor, and everything we fear in adolescence, it is a lie to think that this is about rebellion. Everything
Mm.
we fear about adolescence is them choosing the wrong behaviors to feel better.
Mm.
So let's begin with the right behaviors. Let's begin teaching them in kindergarten, modeling them for our children, and reinforcing them. And if people go to the Center for Parent and Teen Communication, which is parentandteen.com, it's also in my books, but they will have lots and lots of work on stress management and positive coping strategies. But ever so briefly, we want people to be able to listen to their body and interact with their body and the signals their body sends. So to
Mhm.
do that, we need people who know how to use exercise to run from the tiger as they're having anxiety, to relax and how to get themselves into a relaxed state to communicate to their brain, actually, I'm safe and therefore I can think. We need people to be able to eat well because that's what builds our body, to sleep well because that's what creates a resilient mind. We need kids who know how to problem solve,
Mhm.
who don't believe that if they see a problem as a mountain, they understand that there's a bunch of hills making up that mountain. All I got to do is solve or stand on one of them to be
Mhm.
gaining my confidence back. We need kids who need to know how to avoid problems, kids who need to know how to manage their emotions. And we need kids and adults who understand how important we are to each other, that we
Yeah.
belong to one another, that we have a sense of meaning and purpose in our lives. We need all of that to learn how to manage stress. Go up one huge level: human
Mm.
connection. Human connection. When a person is stressed, and instead of turning to the easy, quick fixes that make them feel better in the moment, they turn to another human for support.
Mhm.
That is the most important coping strategy in the world. And honestly, this is why I write books. And this is why I produce all of my materials. All I want is for children to have the adults in their life that will allow them to be okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm right there with you. It is the most critical thing that we can give to one another. With all this, I could talk to you for hours. I'm learning so much, so thank you so much, and thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with everyone. If you were to think about what you really like, just a few takeaways that you really want parents to walk away with or understand,
Yeah.
like one, like what is it that you really want people to walk away with?
Nicole, we really touched on some of them, and I enjoyed this conversation so much. It felt a lot like we were sitting around our dinner
Yeah.
table, brainstorming, right?
Hmm.
But let's think about some of the stuff we said. First, really take care of yourself as a strategic act of good parenting. It's not selfish. Know that. Second, create the kind of relationship where your child knows that they can come to you and that there's no chance of them ever losing you. That's what it means to be the lighthouse. Your love is truly, truly unconditional. Third, communicate in a way that says, I'm going to keep you safe because I love you. And I'm here to guide you, not to control you, to
Mhm.
build you, to shape you, to stand by your side as you discover who you are. And I think that the one other thing is to remember what we're really going for. Now I speak as the daddy of 29-year-olds who are truly my best friends.
Mhm.
And if I had used the word friendship when they were growing up, it would have been a mistake because
Yeah.
adolescents are terrified of losing their friends. So we are better than friends. We're
Mm.
a lighthouse. We're a stable force. But now my children are truly, truly my best friends. And that's a sign of a healthy relationship when they're in their late 20s and I'm in my 60s. So, how do we get there? We want to get to human interdependence. We get there by honoring our children's growing independence. When they see us as the wind behind their sails, not controlling, helping to guide them, then they will confidently stand on their own, knowing you were part of them getting there. When they're
Mm.
confidently standing on their own, they're going to choose to stand beside you.
Thank you, Dr. Ginsburg. It was an incredible conversation. Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you so much for those takeaways.
It was authentically a privilege talking to you, Nicole. Thanks for everything
Yeah.
you did.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Hey Kiddo. If you like what you hear, give us a review wherever you get your podcasts. Learn more about Hey Kiddo at our website, hey-kiddo.com. Have a question for our experts? Email us at hello@hey-kiddo.com.